I retired, all I knew was defending my end zone.
I didn't know what to do. I always had my guard up.
Ready to tear someone's head off.
Then I stopped settling for safe-ish and got safe with ADT.
With 24/7 monitoring.
What's up, Brian?
I'm more relaxed than ever.
And I don't have my head on the swivel anymore. Oh, a black cat chickadee.
I had a whole defensive scheme to keep it safe-ish.
Woo! And safe-ish wasn't good enough. Oh, hey.
Hey, Bam Bam.
What's going on?
Because now when it comes to protecting my house, I use ADT. Coming through! No, not in my house!
Oh, a cat.
The coffee was still steaming in my mug when Vivian dropped the bomb that would change everything. I should have seen it coming. The new perfume at 6 in the morning, the way she'd been checking her phone constantly, that fake smile she'd been wearing for weeks like expensive jewelry that didn't quite fit. "Lucas," she said, settling into the chair across from me at our marble breakfast table, her manicured fingers drumming against the surface. "I need to tell you something important." I looked up from my Wall Street Journal, noting the careful way she'd done her makeup despite claiming she had nowhere to go today. After 15 years of marriage, I'd learned to read the signs. Vivian never put on her war paint unless she was going into battle. "Let me guess," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "You found yourself, again. What is it this time? Pilates? Wine tasting? Charity work you'll abandon in 3 months?" Her perfectly sculpted eyebrows drew together in that expression I'd seen 1,000 times. The look she gave when someone dared to challenge her narrative. "This is serious, Lucas. I've met someone." I set down my cup carefully, the china making a soft clink against the saucer. 20 years of building my company from nothing had taught me to control my reactions, to never let anyone see the hit before I'd calculated my response. "Someone," I repeated. "His name is Derek. Derek Flint." She leaned forward, and I caught another whiff of that new perfume. Something floral and expensive that I definitely hadn't bought her. "He's different. He doesn't care about money or status or any of the things that consume people in our world. He's a yoga instructor, and he's taught me what real love feels like." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I folded my newspaper with deliberate precision and really looked at my wife. 40 years old, still beautiful in that high-maintenance way that required a small army of professionals to maintain. The kind of beauty that came with a monthly price tag higher than most people's mortgages. "Real love," I said. "How refreshing. And I suppose this real love just happened to find you at the country club yoga classes I pay for, using the membership I provide while you were wearing the designer workout clothes I bought you." Her cheeks flushed, but she pressed on. "You don't understand. Derek sees me for who I really am, not just as an accessory to your success." "An accessory," I nodded slowly. "Is that what you think you are?" "Isn't it?" She stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked our perfectly manicured lawn. "When was the last time we had a real conversation, Lucas? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my feelings, my hopes for the future?" I could have pointed out that every time I tried to engage her in conversation about anything deeper than her shopping plans or the latest gossip from her social circle, she looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I could have reminded her of the countless evenings I'd come home eager to share something about my work, only to have her cut me off with complaints about the housekeeper or demands for a new car. Instead, I asked, "So what exactly are you telling me, Vivian?" She turned back to face me, lifting her chin in that defiant way she'd perfected over the years. "I'm leaving you. Today. Derek and I are going to start a real life together, based on genuine feelings instead of material possessions." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Outside, I could hear the landscaping crew starting their weekly maintenance of our grounds. Inside, the grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the seconds of my marriage's final moments. "Well," I said finally, reaching for my phone, "I suppose congratulations are in order." She blinked, clearly expecting a different reaction. "Congratulations? You found your true love, someone who doesn't care about money." I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. "That's wonderful news because you're about to find out exactly what life is like without it." I hit the call button, and put the phone on speaker. It rang twice before my assistant's crisp voice filled the kitchen. "Good morning, Mr. Harlan. You're early today." "Morning, Mira. I need you to do 3 things for me right now. Cancel all of Mrs. Harlan's credit cards, personal and business. Stop the monthly payment to her mother's assisted living facility, and call the locksmith. I need all the locks changed on the house within the hour." Vivian's face went white. "Lucas, you can't." "I can, and I am." I kept my voice level, businesslike. "Mira, you got all that?" "Yes, sir." "Should I also cancel her gym membership and the standing appointments with her stylist and personal trainer?" "Excellent thinking. Yes, cancel everything. If it's in her name and I'm paying for it, cut it off. Today. Consider it done, Mr. Harlan." I ended the call and looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, who was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear mixed with something that might have been respect. "You bastard," she whispered. "Probably, but I'm a bastard with money, which apparently doesn't matter to your new boyfriend. So you should be fine." Her phone buzzed. She looked down at it, and I watched her face crumble as she read whatever message had just appeared. Probably her credit card company, I thought. They were efficient like that. "Lucas, please, you can't just..." "Can't what? Stop paying for your lifestyle while you run off with your yoga instructor? Watch me." I stood up, straightening my tie. "You wanted to find out what real love feels like? Consider this my wedding gift to your new relationship. Reality?" The house phone rang. Vivian lunged for it, probably hoping it was Derek, but her face fell when she heard her mother's voice screeching through the speaker. "Vivian! Vivian, what's happening? The facility just called and said Lucas stopped paying my bills. They're saying I have to move out by the end of the week." I plucked the phone from Vivian's trembling hands. "Hello, Evelyn. Lucas, what is the meaning of this? You can't just abandon family." "You're absolutely right. I can't abandon family. Good thing you stopped being my family about 10 minutes ago when your daughter decided to abandon our marriage for a more spiritually fulfilling relationship." I paused, letting that sink in. "But don't worry. I'm sure Derek's yoga instructor salary will more than cover your medical expenses." I hung up before she could respond. Vivian was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in dark rivulets. "You're destroying everything." "No," I said, grabbing my briefcase and heading for the door. "I'm just stopping paying for it. There's a difference." As I reached the foyer, I called back over my shoulder. "Oh, and Vivian, you might want to call an Uber. Your car's in my name too, and I'll be reporting it stolen if you're still driving it by noon." I walked out into the morning sunshine, leaving behind 15 years of marriage and the sound of my wife's sobs. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing with messages from Mira, confirming that everything had been canceled. The locksmith's van was pulling into the driveway as I backed out. Perfect timing. My office occupied the entire top floor of a glass tower downtown, with views that stretched across the city I'd helped build through 2 decades of calculated risks and strategic acquisitions. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd spent years creating an empire to share with someone who just walked away from it all for a man who probably couldn't afford to take her to dinner at the places she considered beneath her. Mira knocked and entered without waiting for permission, a privilege I'd granted her after 5 years of flawless service and absolute discretion. "Everything's been canceled," she reported, settling into the chair across from my desk with her tablet. "Credit cards, gym membership, spa treatments, her mother's facility payments, even the weekly flower delivery. The locksmith finished 20 minutes ago, and building security has been notified that Mrs. Harlan no longer has access to this floor." "Good. What about the car?" "Reported as stolen, as requested. Though I should mention she called the dealership trying to have it transferred to her name. They explained she'd need your signature as the primary account holder." I almost smiled. Almost. I assume she didn't take that well. There was screaming involved. The sales manager hung up on her. "Excellent. Now I need you to do something else for me. I want to know everything about Derek Flint, and I mean everything. Where he lives, where he works, his financial situation, his background, his social media presence, parking tickets, library fines. I want a complete picture." Mira's fingers flew across her tablet screen. "I'll have a preliminary report within 2 hours. Should I engage our usual investigative service?" "Yes, but keep it quiet. And Mira, I also want to know exactly how long this affair has been going on. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that shows a pattern. She nodded and headed for the door, then paused. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, are you all right? The question caught me off guard. In 5 years, Mira had never asked me anything personal. She handled my schedule, managed my communications, and executed my instructions with robotic efficiency. Personal concern wasn't part of her job description. I'm fine, I said. Why do you ask? Because in all the time I've worked for you, I've never seen you this calm during a crisis. It's unsettling. After she left, I sat back in my chair and considered her observation. She was right. I was calm. Calmer than I'd been in months, maybe years. For the first time and longer than I could remember, I knew exactly what I was dealing with. No more wondering why Vivian seemed distant. No more making excuses for her constant dissatisfaction. No more walking on eggshells around someone who treated our marriage like a business arrangement she was perpetually trying to renegotiate. The phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and saw my lawyer's name. Sheldon. Lucas, I just got an interesting call from Vivian's new attorney. Apparently, she's planning to file for divorce and wants to discuss an equitable distribution of assets. Sheldon Price had been handling my legal affairs for 12 years, ever since I'd bought out my first competitor and needed someone who understood that business was war by other means. He was expensive, ruthless, and had never lost a case that mattered. Equitable, I repeated. How generous of her. What did you tell them? That we'd be happy to discuss a settlement once we've completed our own asset investigation. I may have also mentioned that adultery is still grounds for fault-based divorce in this state, and that such cases tend to significantly impact asset distribution. And their response? Sudden interest in mediation rather than litigation. Funny how that works. 2 hours later, Mira returned with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. She set it on my desk with the satisfied expression of someone who'd done exceptional work. Derek Flint, she announced, 38 years old, originally from Ohio, moved here 18 months ago after his previous yoga studio in Columbus failed, owing approximately $40,000 in unpaid rent and vendor bills. Currently employed part-time at Serenity Springs Wellness Center, teaching 3 classes a week. Lives in a studio apartment in the Riverside complex, rent 3 months behind. Drives a 2015 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and 2 outstanding parking tickets. I opened the folder and began scanning the documents. Bank statements showing a checking account that rarely exceeded 3 digits. Credit report that looked like a disaster zone. Social media posts full of inspirational quotes about living authentically and rejecting material possessions. Posted from an iPhone that was clearly several generations old. This is excellent work, Mira. What about the timeline of the affair? Based on phone records and credit card statements, they first made contact 4 months ago when Mrs. Harlan signed up for his Tuesday morning yoga class. The first suspicious activity was 6 weeks later. A lunch at that organic cafe downtown where she paid for both meals. Since then, there have been regular meetings, always during business hours, always charged to cards you pay for. I flipped through the documentation, noting the pattern. Lunch dates, coffee meetings, even a weekend trip to a spa resort that Vivian had told me was a girls' retreat with her friend Kendra. The credit card statements told a different story. Charges for couples massages and romantic dinners for 2. She's been financing her own affair, I said, using my money to date her boyfriend. It appears so. There's more. Mr. Flint has been posting on social media about his generous patron who's helping him pursue his dreams. He's even started looking at commercial real estate for a new studio, apparently under the impression that funding will be available. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. I think it's time I met Mr. Flint personally. An hour later, I was standing outside the Riverside apartment complex, a converted warehouse in the part of town that developers called up and coming and residents called still sketchy. The kind of place where people lived when they were either just starting out or had given up entirely. Derek Flint lived in Unit 4B, according to the directory. I climbed the stairs, noting the peeling paint and the smell of cooking oil that seemed to permeate the entire building. This was where Vivian's true love brought her for their romantic encounters. I wondered if she'd ever actually been inside, or if they always met at places where she could use my credit card to maintain the illusion of comfort. I knocked on the door. Footsteps approached, and then the door opened to reveal a man who looked exactly like what Central Casting would order if they needed a yoga instructor. Tall, lean, with shoulder-length brown hair, and the kind of carefully maintained scruff that took more effort than a clean shave. He was wearing hemp pants and a tank top that showed off the kind of muscle definition that came from a lifetime of physical activity rather than gym membership. Derek Flint? Yeah, that's me. Can I help you? I'm Lucas Harlan, Vivian's husband. His face went through several interesting expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, guilt, defiance, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. To his credit, he didn't try to close the door or pretend he didn't know what I was talking about. I figured you'd show up eventually, he said. You want to come in? I think I'll stay right here. This won't take long. He leaned against the doorframe, trying to project casual confidence, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Look, man, I know this is awkward, but Vivian and I didn't plan for this to happen. Sometimes the universe just... Stop. I held up a hand. Let me save us both some time. You're broke, desperate, and you saw an opportunity when a wealthy, unhappy woman walked into your yoga class. You've been playing the spiritual guru angle, telling her everything she wanted to hear about authentic living and true love, while she's been paying for your meals and probably slipping you cash for your rent. His jaw tightened. You don't know anything about what Vivian and I have. I know she's been financing it with my credit cards. I know you've been telling your friends about your generous patron. And I know that as of this morning, that particular revenue stream has dried up permanently. I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of his social media post from the previous week, a photo of an expensive organic lunch with the caption, "Grateful for the abundance the universe provides through beautiful souls." The universe, I said. Interesting way to describe my American Express card. For the first time, he looked genuinely uncomfortable. Vivian wanted to pay. I told her she didn't have to, but she insisted. Of course she did. It's easy to be generous with other people's money. I put my phone away and looked him directly in the eyes. Here's what's going to happen, Derek. You're going to discover that dating a woman with no income and expensive tastes is significantly less spiritually fulfilling than you imagine. You're going to realize that true love doesn't pay rent or put gas in your car. And eventually you're going to start resenting the fact that your soulmate can't contribute anything to your relationship except drama and debt. You're wrong about us, he said, but there was less conviction in his voice now. Am I? Let me ask you something. When was the last time you paid for one of your dates? When was the last time she offered to come here, to your apartment, instead of meeting at restaurants and cafes where she could pick up the tab? His silence was answer enough. I thought so. I straightened my tie and prepared to leave. Enjoy your authentic life, Derek. I hope you like ramen noodles, because that's about all you're going to be able to afford once reality sets in. I turned and walked back toward the stairs, then paused and called back over my shoulder. Oh, and Derek, you might want to find a new place to park your car. This neighborhood isn't as safe as it used to be. The first call came at 6 a.m. the next morning. I was in my home gym, working through my usual routine, when my phone started buzzing with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message while toweling off. Lucas, this is Patricia, Vivian's sister. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but you need to call me back immediately. Mother is having a complete breakdown, and Vivian is staying on my couch, crying her eyes out. This is family, Lucas. Family doesn't abandon family. I deleted the message and headed for the shower. By the time I was dressed and ready for work, there were 6 more voicemails from various members of Vivian's extended family. Her brother Michael demanding I act like a man and work this out. Her cousin Jennifer explaining that I was destroying the family and needed to step up and do the right thing. Even her elderly Aunt Margaret, who I'd met exactly twice in 15 years, felt qualified to lecture me about the sanctity of marriage and my obligation to forgive. Not one of them mentioned Derek. Not one of them acknowledged that Vivian had chosen to leave. In their version of events, I was the villain who had arbitrarily decided to cut off their meal ticket. Because that's what I'd been for 15 years. Not Vivian's husband, but the family ATM. The reliable source of emergency loans that never got repaid, holiday gifts that grew more expensive every year, and charitable contributions to whatever cause they decided to support that month. Vivian's mother's assisted living facility, her brother's mortgage payments during his temporary unemployment that had lasted 3 years, her sister's children's private school tuition because they deserved the best opportunities. I'd been so busy trying to be the good provider that I'd never stopped to ask why none of them had ever seemed particularly interested in having a relationship with me that didn't involve financial support. The revelation was liberating. At the office, Mira greeted me with coffee and an update on the Derek situation. Mr. Flint called the building's security desk at 3 a.m., apparently trying to get your home address. When they refused to provide it, he became agitated. They have him on video making threats about rich bastards who think they own everything. Threats? Nothing specific enough to warrant police involvement, but concerning enough that I took the liberty of arranging additional security for your residence. There's also been some interesting activity on social media. She handed me a tablet showing Derek's Instagram account. His latest post was a long, rambling essay about toxic masculinity and wealthy oppressors who use money as a weapon against authentic love. The comments were a mix of supportive friends telling him to stay strong and strangers pointing out that maybe he should get a real job. He's spiraling, Indopan, I observed. It appears so. There's more. Mrs. Harlan has been calling the office every hour, demanding to speak with you. When I explained you weren't available, she started making threats about going to the media with stories about your abusive behavior and financial manipulation. I handed back the tablet. Let her. Any reporter who does basic fact-checking will discover that her definition of abuse is stopping payment on credit cards after she announced she was leaving for another man. Should I prepare a statement for the press? Not yet, but start documenting everything. Every call, every threat, every social media post. If this gets ugly, I want a complete record. The morning passed quietly until Mira announced that I had a visitor who claimed to be family. Michael Thornton, she said, Mrs. Harlan's brother. He says it's urgent. I'd met Michael perhaps a dozen times over the years, usually at family gatherings where he spent most of his time complaining about his job, his boss, his mortgage, or whatever other aspect of his life was currently disappointing him. He was 3 years younger than Vivian, but looked older, with the soft build and perpetually aggrieved expression of someone who'd never quite figured out why life wasn't easier. Send him in. Michael entered my office like he owned it, which was interesting considering he'd never visited before. He was wearing a suit that had probably been expensive 5 years ago and shoes that needed resolving. His handshake was too firm, overcompensating for something. Lucas, we need to talk. Apparently, have a seat. He settled into the chair across from my desk and immediately launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. I don't know what Vivian did to upset you, but this scorched earth approach isn't solving anything. You're hurting innocent people. Mom, the kids, all of us who depend on family helping family. Depend on, I repeated. Interesting choice of words. You know what I mean? We're family. When one of us does well, we all do well. That's how it's supposed to work. I leaned back in my chair and studied him. Michael, in the 15 years I've been married to your sister, how many times have you called me just to talk? How many times have you invited me to do something that didn't involve me paying for it? How many times have you asked about my business, my interests, my life, without it being a prelude to asking for money? His face flushed. That's not fair. You're busy, successful. We didn't want to bother you. But you don't mind bothering me when you need your mortgage paid. That was a loan. A loan implies an intention to repay it. You've never even mentioned paying it back. The flush deepened. I've been going through a rough patch. For 3 years. We stared at each other across the desk, and I could see him recalculating his approach. The righteous anger was fading, replaced by something that looked like desperation. Look, he said, leaning forward, maybe we haven't been as close as we should have been. Maybe we took advantage of your generosity. But cutting off Mom's medical care? That's cruel, Lucas. She's family. She was family when I was married to Vivian. Now she's the mother of a woman who left me for her yoga instructor. Why would I continue paying her bills? Because it's the right thing to do. According to who? You. The same person who hasn't contributed a dime to his own mother's care in 5 years. He stood up abruptly, his composure finally cracking. You can't just abandon us like this. We'll fight you. We'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Please do. I'd love for everyone to know exactly what kind of man I am. The kind who worked 18-hour days to build a business from nothing. The kind who paid for your mother's medical care, your mortgage, your sister's children's education, and your family's vacations for 15 years without ever asking for anything in return except basic loyalty from my wife. The kind who only stopped being generous when that wife decided to trade me in for a younger model. I stood up as well, moving around the desk to face him directly. But more importantly, Michael, I'd love for everyone to know what kind of family you are. The kind that only calls when they need money. The kind that treats their daughter's husband like a walking bank account. The kind that's more upset about losing their meal ticket than they are about their daughter's marriage ending. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time any of you asked if I was happy? When was the last time someone in your family showed interest in my life that didn't involve my wallet? When was the last time anyone said thank you for anything I've done for you? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. We both knew the answer. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to go back to your family and explain that the gravy train has reached its final destination. You're going to figure out how to pay your own bills, support your own mother, and solve your own problems. And if any of you try to harass me, threaten me, or spread lies about me, I'll make sure the whole world knows exactly how much money I've given your family over the years and how little gratitude I received in return. Michael's shoulders sagged. Lucas, please, you need to leave my office. Now. After he left, I sat in my chair and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Complete clarity about who the people in my life really were and what they actually wanted from me. It was the most liberating feeling I'd ever experienced. The next phase of my education in the true nature of family loyalty came in the form of a carefully orchestrated campaign that would have impressed a political strategist. Over the following week, I received visits, calls, emails, and text messages from virtually every member of Vivian's extended family tree, each with their own variation on the same basic theme. I was being unreasonable, vindictive, and cruel, and I needed to forgive Vivian and restore everyone's financial support immediately. The approach varied depending on the messenger. Vivian's sister Patricia tried guilt, explaining how my actions were affecting the children. Her cousin Jennifer attempted manipulation, suggesting that my reputation in the community was suffering because of my heartless behavior. Her brother-in-law David went with intimidation, implying that I might face legal consequences for abandoning my family obligations. But it was Vivian's mother, Evelyn, who provided the most enlightening conversation. She arrived at my office unannounced on a Thursday afternoon, somehow managing to convince building security to let her up by claiming to be my mother-in-law, who needed to discuss urgent family business. Evelyn Thornton was 72 years old and had perfected the art of looking both fragile and formidable simultaneously. She entered my office leaning heavily on a walking cane that I suspected was more prop than necessity, dressed in the kind of expensive but understated clothing that whispered rather than shouted about money. Lucas, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk without being invited. We need to discuss this situation like civilized adults. Hello, Evelyn. I wasn't aware we had a situation to discuss. Don't be obtuse. You know perfectly well what I'm talking about. She set her purse on her lap and fixed me with the kind of stare that had probably terrified her children into submission decades ago. This nonsense with Vivian needs to stop. Marriage is work, Lucas. It requires compromise, forgiveness, and maturity. I agree completely. Perhaps you should share that wisdom with your daughter. Vivian made a mistake, a foolish, impulsive mistake, but not an unforgivable one. People have affairs, Lucas. It's unfortunate, but it happens. The mark of a strong marriage is the ability to work through these difficulties. I leaned back in my chair and studied her. So your position is that I should forgive Vivian for leaving me for another man, take her back, and resume paying for everyone's lifestyle as if nothing happened. I'm saying that 15 years of marriage shouldn't be thrown away because of one indiscretion. One indiscretion, is that what we're calling it? Her jaw tightened. What would you call it? A choice. Vivian didn't accidentally fall into bed with Derek. She didn't trip and land on his yoga mat. She made a conscious decision to pursue a relationship with another man while married to me, using my money to finance their dates, and then announced she was leaving me for him because she'd found true love. She's realized she made a mistake. She wants to come home. That was news to me. When did this revelation occur? When she discovered what life is like without your support. She's been staying with Patricia, sleeping on a couch, looking for work. She's learned her lesson, Lucas. Isn't that enough? And there it was. The truth laid bare with stunning simplicity. Vivian didn't want to reconcile because she missed me or regretted her choices. She wanted to come back because being broke was inconvenient. Let me ask you something, Evelyn. In all the conversations you've had with Vivian about this situation, has she ever mentioned missing me? Has she talked about realizing she loves me, or wanting to rebuild our relationship, or being sorry for the pain she caused? Evelyn's silence was eloquent. Or have all her concerns been about money? The house, the cars, the credit cards, your medical bills, the family support she can no longer provide? Financial security is part of marriage, she said finally. It's one of the things spouses provide for each other. You're absolutely right. And what was Vivian providing for me in return? Another silence. I'll tell you what she was providing, I continued. Contempt, constant criticism, a never-ending list of complaints about everything I did, everything I didn't do, everything I was, and everything I wasn't. She treated me like a combination ATM and personal assistant whose job was to fund her lifestyle and solve her problems while she pursued her own interests. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time Vivian asked about my work? When was the last time she showed interest in my goals, my challenges, my hopes for the future? When was the last time she said thank you for anything I provided for this family? Evelyn's composure was beginning to crack. You're being unfair. Am I? Let me ask you the same questions. In 15 years of marriage to your daughter, how many times have you asked me about my life? How many times have you called just to talk, or invited me to do something that didn't involve me writing a check? How many times have you treated me like a person instead of a resource? She stood up abruptly, gripping her cane tighter than necessary. You're making a terrible mistake, Lucas. Family is the most important thing in life. Without family, you have nothing. You're absolutely right, I said. Family is everything. Real family. The kind that loves you for who you are, not what you can provide. The kind that supports you during difficult times instead of abandoning you the moment you stop being useful. The kind that says thank you instead of demanding more. I stood as well, moving to open the door for her. Unfortunately, I've learned that you and your children don't understand what real family means. You understand transactions. You understand what you can get from me, but you've never understood what you should give in return. She paused in the doorway, her face flushed with anger and something that might have been shame. This isn't over, Lucas. Yes, it is. It's been over for years. I was just too blind to see it. After she left, I called Mira into my office. I want you to arrange a meeting, I told her. All of them. Vivian, her parents, her siblings, everyone who's been calling and demanding that I do the right thing. Tell them I've reconsidered my position and I'm prepared to discuss a resolution. What kind of resolution? I smiled for the first time in weeks. The kind they deserve. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. in my office's main conference room. I chose the timing deliberately, early enough that they'd have to take time off work, late enough that they'd spend the morning anticipating what I might offer them. The conference room was perfect for what I had planned. Formal, intimidating, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city, and a long mahogany table that could seat 20 people comfortably. I arrived early and positioned myself at the head of the table, with Mira seated to my right and my lawyer, Sheldon Price, to my left. The symbolism wasn't subtle. I was holding court, and they were the supplicants. They arrived together, which told me they'd coordinated their approach. Vivian entered first, looking smaller than I remembered, dressed in an outfit I'd bought her months ago that now seemed too expensive for someone living on her sister's couch. Behind her came the full delegation, her parents, her sister Patricia and brother Michael, her cousin Jennifer, and even her brother-in-law David, who I'd specifically not invited, but who apparently felt entitled to attend anyway. They took seats along the opposite side of the table, facing me like defendants awaiting judgment. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice carrying the tone I used for difficult board meetings. "I've asked you here because I've been doing some thinking about family, loyalty, and what we owe each other." Vivian leaned forward eagerly. "Lucas, I'm so glad you're willing to—" I held up a hand, cutting her off. "I'll be doing the talking today. You'll have a chance to respond when I'm finished." She sat back, chastened. "Over the past 2 weeks, I've received dozens of calls, visits, and messages from all of you. Each of you has explained in your own way why I should forgive Vivian's affair, take her back, and resume providing financial support to this family. You've talked about forgiveness, about second chances, about the importance of family loyalty." I paused, letting my eyes move around the table, making contact with each of them. What's interesting is that in all of these conversations, not one of you has acknowledged that Vivian did anything wrong. Not one of you has suggested that she should apologize or make amends or demonstrate that she's learned from her mistakes. Instead, you've all focused on what I should do, what I owe you, what my obligations are to this family. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We're not saying Vivian was right to—" "You're not saying she was wrong either. In fact, the general consensus seems to be that her affair was just something that happened, like bad weather or a flat tire, an inconvenience that I should overlook in the interest of maintaining the status quo." I stood and walked to the windows, looking out over the city skyline. But here's what I've realized over the past 2 weeks. This family has never been about mutual support or love or any of the things families are supposed to provide each other. This family has been about one thing: my money. The silence in the room was deafening. "Don't believe me? Let's review the facts." I turned back to face them. "Evelyn, I've been paying for your assisted living facility for 8 years. Have you ever asked if I could afford it? Have you ever offered to contribute? Have you ever even said thank you?" Vivian's mother opened her mouth to respond, but I continued before she could speak. "Michael, I've given you over $200,000 in loans over the past 5 years. Have you ever made a payment? Have you ever even mentioned paying me back? Or have you just assumed that your sister's husband was your personal bank?" Michael's face was red, but he remained silent. "Patricia, I paid for your children's private school tuition for 3 years. When was the last time you invited me to one of their school events? When was the last time you asked how my business was doing? When was the last time you treated me like their uncle instead of their scholarship fund?" I walked back to my seat but remained standing. "And Vivian," I looked directly at my wife, 15 years of marriage, 15 years of providing everything you asked for and most things you didn't. A house, cars, vacations, jewelry, clothes, unlimited spending money and support for your entire extended family. In return, I got criticism, contempt, and eventually betrayal." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Lucas, please. I'm not finished. You left me for a man who couldn't afford to take you to McDonald's. You financed your own affair with my credit cards. You told me that Derek didn't care about money, that he loved you for who you really are. But the moment that money was cut off, you came running back. Not because you missed me, not because you realized you made a mistake, but because being broke is inconvenient." I sat down and folded my hands on the table. "So here's what I've decided. You're all absolutely right. Family should support family. Family should be loyal. Family should forgive mistakes and help each other through difficult times." Hope flickered across several faces around the table, which is why I'm prepared to give each of you exactly what you deserve for 15 years of loyalty, support, and genuine affection. I nodded to Mira, who began placing envelopes in front of each person at the table. "Open them," I said. They did, and I watched their faces as they discovered what was inside each envelope. A $10 bill and a note that read, "For a hamburger. Enjoy your authentic life." The silence stretched for nearly a minute before Michael exploded. $10? Language, Michael. There are ladies present. I kept my voice calm, reasonable. $10 is more than any of you ever gave me in return for my generosity. It's more gratitude than you ever showed, more loyalty than you ever demonstrated, and more genuine affection than you ever provided. Patricia was staring at her envelope like it contained a snake. This is cruel, Lucas. Is it? Let me tell you what's cruel. Cruel is treating someone like an ATM for 15 years. Cruel is never saying thank you. Cruel is calling someone family only when you need money. Cruel is supporting your daughter's affair and then demanding that her husband forgive and forget because it's financially convenient. I stood again, and this time Mira and Sheldon stood with me. But most cruel of all is sitting in my office, at my conference table, expecting me to reward your disloyalty with continued generosity because that's what I've always done before. Vivian was sobbing openly now. Lucas, I love you. I made a mistake, but I love you. No, Vivian, you love my money. You love the lifestyle I provided. You love the security and status that came with being my wife. But you've never loved me. If you had, you wouldn't have been able to treat me the way you did. I walked to the door and opened it, revealing 2 security guards waiting in the hallway. Gentlemen, please escort these people from the building. They're no longer welcome here. As they filed out, each clutching their envelope, I heard muttered threats and promises that this wasn't over. But I knew better. It was over. It had been over for years. I'd just been too invested in the illusion to see it. Vivian was the last to leave. She paused in the doorway, mascara streaked down her cheeks, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen her. What am I supposed to do now? She whispered. I looked at her for a long moment, this woman I'd been married to for 15 years, and felt nothing but pity. I suggest you call Derek, I said. I'm sure he'll be happy to support you now that you're free to pursue your authentic life together. Derek's gone. He left town last week when he realized I didn't have access to your money anymore. I wasn't surprised. Then I suggest you figure out what the rest of us learned a long time ago, how to take care of yourself. She opened her mouth to say something else, but I closed the door before she could speak. Through the glass, I watched security escort her to the elevator, and then she was gone. I turned back to Mira and Sheldon, who were still standing by the conference table. Well, Sheldon said, that was the most expensive therapy session in history, but probably worth every penny. I laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in months. You know what the funny thing is? I said. I feel like I just got my life back. And for the first time in 15 years, that was absolutely true.